In this video, I'm going to talk about Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua and my feedback, as well as all of the marquee boxing matches of the week. You guys seem to like this. If you enjoy this content, be sure to like the video. As always, if you're new to the channel, subscribe. Hello and thank you. We try to record multiple videos a week, updating people on great boxing topics. And if you do agree or disagree, typically people disagree, leave a comment below and tell me your thoughts on this video. Let's get into it. So Jake Paul lost to Anthony Joshua this past weekend. He was knocked out. Yet with most things Jake Paul, somehow we're not talking about Anthony Joshua as much as Jake Paul. Somewhat of a genius in that, right? In the build up to this fight, I recorded a video 24 hours prior and said, what is Jake Paul thinking? And one could argue that that video could still be relevant because we didn't really learn his intentions. We learned that he's somewhat crazy. He's willing to take hard fights against a Olympic gold medalist in Anthony Joshua, a very scary puncher. And he got damage that is going to probably follow him from after this. But what did we learn about Jake Paul? I think what we learned is Jake Paul might be like Facebook was in the late aughts. There was MySpace and there was Facebook, but what is this Facebook thing? It's more geared towards college. It's more, I remember hearing people saying that if you're not in college, there's no point to be on Facebook. And then all of a sudden it had video platforms. All of a sudden it has this. And I think that though Jake Paul isn't social media or he isn't necessarily a tech entity, he runs Most Valuable Promotions along with Nikisha. I think Jake's intentions in boxing are to shake things up. You hear the word disruptor a lot this week. And the underlying sentiment I felt was, or at least I seem to think is, Jake is willing to take some risky fights that create drama in an era where we're coming off of that a lot of guys didn't do that. From 2015 to 2019, we heard the term, the fights need to marinate. Fights are no longer marinating in the sport of boxing. Maybe one or two here and there, but we are getting most of the fights we want to see. And I think with Paul, what we're seeing is it was always ridiculous that he was possibly going to fight Gervonta Davis. And then he moves up and fights a bigger man in Anthony Joshua, both kind of ridiculous in sentiment. But what you can't doubt is Jake Paul's ability to gauge the marketplace and figure out what's going to engage and get people to talk about it. Fighting Anthony Joshua was a calculated risk that really moved the needle, and if nothing else, showed his commitment to the sport and his toughness as a fighter and his willingness to put his body on the line. Who knows if you ever fight again after such a one-sided fight? It was a scary proposition, and he went through with it. On the other hand, Anthony Joshua, strange career. You know, I think that for a lot of fight fans, he was an underdog story going into the 2012 Olympics, at least through my memory, wins the gold. Then he kind of was like, he's going to be the next great heavyweight. Everyone said that. Deontay Wilder got a lot of shtick from a lot of people because he was very limited in what he did. Very crude craftsman, hits hard. There's no way this could work. Those were the best two guys perceived of their era. Lo and behold, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk emerge. They become better. So the two guys who were most heavily hyped ended up being maybe 3 or 4, or you could even argue further back. And as the decade goes further, as we go into, the 13, 14 years beyond that Olympic Games, the context of Joshua's career is confusing because he had a lot of money behind him and he had a lot of opportunities. And though he did well, he also did the bare minimum for the opportunities he faced. His struggles have always been he can't turn defense into offense, offense into defense. He gets hit, and when he gets hit, things can change. Things changed with Andy Ruiz, and he gets stopped. Alexander Usyk just showed that feints and movement and subtle abilities were going to freeze Joshua, and he didn't feel comfortable letting it go. And then Dubois, I think, probably sealed the deal on his career. I say all that to say, nothing about this performance Joshua did made me excited to see him in with Tyson Fury, which is a rumored fight out there. I'm not excited. This version of Joshua looks more like a businessman. He's a great interview. He's a compelling figure when he talks. But the fighter itself, a lot of that early Joshua moments as a pro, I think about the scary puncher he was. And that guy has left the building. Meanwhile, with Jake Paul, I think that there's a real chance that we maybe never see Jake fight again, right? Because who knows how you recover from an injury like this, but no one can ever question Jake's credibility as a boxer. He took on a world-rated fighter who was bigger than him, and he stepped into a professional fight, and he took damage from him, and that should be applauded. So I think that the big thing about Jake Paul is people come in with a preconceived notion that they just don't want to like the guy. And the true answer about Jake Paul is it's complicated. It's a complicated figure. He does a lot of good things, especially in empowering women's boxing. And a lot of times his work ethic is really exceptional. He's a confusing figure. And I think that we're going to enter into eras that are even more confusing. And everything we knew about boxing is changing. It's evolving. We look at maybe, and this will transition to another topic, probably the second biggest fight of the weekend was Chase Demoor beating Andrew Tate. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Andrew Tate, he's kind of a right-wing provocateur political figure that some people like, some people don't like, but he's made a brand out of just saying strong opinions on the internet. And he took a fight, and he looked just absolutely clueless in what to do. And Chase Demoor kind of knows some stuff, but he's pretty clueless too in there. And he won on physicality and size and just kind of putting the shots together on him. That's probably one of the more talked about fights leading out of the weekend. And we're entering a time where kind of, I wouldn't say if we're not careful, but there is a level of boxing is starting to fall into who can get the most visibility, and we see it with some fighters. Canelo fighting Edgar Berlanga. Berlanga never took that challenging step-up fight to really earn a Canelo fight. It seemed like it was popularity and accessibility and maybe whatever, and that got him in that spot. So let's not act like pro boxing doesn't do that at times too. So I think we're entering into a world where boxing is eager to appease people who bring in viewership. And what happens there is sometimes talent is not always rewarded. In the case with that, because you have a talented up-and-comer on the Demoor Tate card in David Lopez, and he's lower on the bill. Amir Anderson's an interesting up-and-comer, lower on the card. Those are people that have traditional boxing backgrounds that are really exciting fighters. Let's go about more of the fights this weekend. Giorgio Visioli is one of my favorite up-and-comers. I think this next coming year, he's probably going to be a breakout guy. He's probably going to be on the cusp of, getting his name out there. If he stays active, I could see him really in a domestic level title type bout, or even moving up the rankings pretty high. I think he's really interesting fighter in that regard. He gets a win. I think that TMI Ayton is someone who's been fighting on domestic British undercards. She's someone that you really need to pay attention to. She's staying active. She's winning. And there's obviously a talent component there that's fairly fascinating. The following day, Ramon Cardenas proved that he's not just a one-hit wonder. People could point to the opponent and go, okay, Erik Robles, who's this guy? Here's the deal with Ramon Cardenas. He's coming off the biggest performance of his career, beating Nao Inoue, and then coming off of that performance, he carried a card. Sure, it's ProBox TV. You could say it's not the biggest cards, but to go and headline a card off a big performance, who knows how much media he did, but to carry the brunt of the media, to know that the card is built around you, and then to get a walk-off knockout, I think is a really telling indicator that this is a guy that's going to be a solid addition to that division. And it's big, those bounce back moments after a quote unquote star making performance, to not falter, to not fall backwards. That ProBox TV card, by the way, was amazing. Joeshon James gets a win over Martinez. The fight has a double knockdown, which is zany. Joeshon James has taken a crazy hard schedule to start his career. More than likely will get himself into a title contention fight. His only loss is a loss to Lester Martinez. His coach, Dre Martinez, stopped the fight. I think that Joeshon could have continued, but he kind of didn't want him to take any more punishment in that fight. Lester Martinez now is on the brink of a world title shot, and that fight was fairly competitive until Martinez landed that big shot. So there's some intrigue about the trajectory of Joeshon James because he's beaten, off the top of my head, 3 or 4 undefeated fighters. He's won fights on the B side. He's a very interesting figure. In fact, he fought a Kazakh fighter who was undefeated on an undercard and got a draw with him. He's just willing to take chances because he has a deep inner belief. And I think those are guys that are worth following because we kind of are in an era, and we've always been in this era, where a lot of up-and-comers want some benefits, want some advantages, or want to fight fighters where they feel better than. And Joeshon, from an early point in his career, has taken chances and really believed in himself and bet on himself. And if he gets to that world-class level, I think that's really going to pay off because he's going to have a deep, deep self-belief that's going to fuel him. And then on the undercard, Marlon Harrington, my guy, gets a first-round knockout. I think there's a very good chance when we do the award show next week that he wins knockout of the year. I mean, it's a jarring, startling knockout. It's very, very scary. And he did it over like an undefeated prospect. And when you beat an undefeated prospect, that's different to me than being a fighter who's a betting favorite that gets the knockout. I think that early on the card, as funny as it might sound, winning by knockout, a devastating knockout, and having a couple of losses, that shows a strong self-belief. I'm kind of saying the same words, but it's true. It shows that you're not entering this with a mentality of you're going to lose, and I'm very impressed with that. Tim Tszyu fought in Australia. Good little bounce-back fight. Was it the best performance ever? No, but it's a rebuild. So he got his rebuild win. That's good. Nonito Donaire lost to Tsutsumi. Tsutsumi might be the best fighter nobody really talks about. It's yet to be decided, but I really think there's a chance this is if we did a top 20 fighters in the world, pound for pound, or just name the 20 fighters, Tsutsumi might be on that list. But I feel like the strike against him is he fights in Japan. The Japanese fights are harder to find than ever since the ESPN deal. I feel like I watched all the top-ranked Japanese cards, and now since that hasn't happened, it's hard to find these fights. It's only for the fanatics. And he fights at bantamweight. And since Naoya Inoue has left bantamweight, I think a lot of people's interests have kind of been not fully there. And then when Junto Nakatani was there, it was kind of obvious Junto's the best guy, so they're not really following the division. Tsutsumi, if Jesse Bam Rodriguez moves up, that's an awesome fight. That really is an awesome fight, and I hope that we see that one day. But Tsutsumi really impressed me. Split decision win. And Nonito Donaire, Dakota's a little critical, listen to the show, but I was impressed with Donaire because he's in his 40s, and the only guys he's beating are really solid, or the only guys that are beating him are really solid champions. So I'm not sure how much longer Nonito wants to do this, but he's not showing any decline per se in performance, and he has the power to maintain. So it's really up to him, but I was really impressed with this because this was a really close fight. It's an entertaining back and forth fight. I was excited watching this. I think that if you watch my program, this is the type of stuff that you really enjoy, these type of fights. Something creepy went on over in the other room, so that's why I was like, I startled myself. Then off the top of my head, Alycia Baumgardner gets a good win over Leila Beuadoin. I was pretty impressed with this because I expected Baumgardner to be in a hard fight or even lose this fight because she's just kind of seemed very happy with celebrity. In this fight, she put together a mature, composed performance. Credit to Derek James. I thought that was a really good performance. Jahmal Harvey was the standout on the Jake Paul, Anthony Joshua card. Absolutely phenomenal performance. Looks like a next-level fighter. The fight that really caught my eye was Cherneka Johnson versus Amanda Galle. Please bring Amanda Galle back. Good talker, entertaining figure. Really enjoyed everything she did. Cherneka Johnson, the main loss that she has is to Ellie Scotney, who I wouldn't be shocked is the best if she's the best women's boxer in the next 3 years. So not a huge knock on her. That was a really great fight. I hope that both fighters get meaningful fights. Yoga Valle in another good, fun, exciting fight, won it down the stretch. And Avious Griffin, the underdog, getting a knockout win over Justin Cardona. Big statement after his loss in his last fight. I think he's an interesting figure. I keep saying that. But he's a compelling figure in the division. He's flawed to a certain degree. It looks like he came late to the sport. He's got technical deficiencies, but he hits hard. He's tough as hell, and he's willing to exchange with punches. And you never know. He could make maybe a great action fight. He could make a fight of the year type, or he could catch a guy and put himself in position for a title, and who knows how the chips fold. Maybe he can even win a belt. So interesting result from there. Going over to the Salita card, Kaye Scott beats Olivia Curry. It just feels like in this fight, Kaye made an adjustment slightly, but it also felt like Olivia Curry slowing down. Olivia Curry has a very physical style, a very hard style. It's based on durability. It's based on physicality. She's coming off a hard fight against Kaye Scott that was a fight of the year type in September. It wasn't that much of a layoff. It was just a quick turnaround for this fight, which is great because they got it. But at the same time, one has to wonder how much more does Curry have in the tank? Because in this fight, she looked a little bit slower. She looked a little reluctant to throw her hands. Part of that could have been Kaye Scott's ability to get off, but I also think there might be a little bit of Curry's had a lot of hard fights, a lot of physical fights. I didn't see her fight with Melody Popovic, or I did see her fight with Shadeja Green, but I might guess that there's been an accumulation of punches and she might be training as hard as she can, but it might not apply as much on fight night. So, but Kaye Scott, big win. She's a unified world champion. Now for Kaye Scott, there's an obvious trilogy bout between Desley Robinson and herself. Desley Robinson beat her. I believe that Kaye Scott holds a win over her. So now you could have a trilogy for the undisputed women's middleweight title. They're two Australian fighters. That would be great. If there's a world where that could be on a card with Jay Apataya, that would be phenomenal. I'm not sure we live in that world, but I'd love to see it. Hopefully we get to see that because that would be something. Tony Harrison gets a win over Brian Chavez. I can't lie. I wasn't thrilled with his performance. He was getting hit a lot. He stopped Chavez, who's been stopped in 7 of his last 8 fights, I believe. Something of that number. Don't exactly quote me if that's not exactly right. But he just doesn't look like the same fighter per se. There's a durability thing. The legs aren't fully there. And, he wants a big fight coming down. He wants a big fight. Sounds like he wants Errol Spence. Price Taylor, there's some good and bad with Price. I still think there's a focus component to him, but he has the volume and he can keep it up, and that's good. And Sedarius Simons, I think, is a good test for Price Taylor. He gets a first-round knockout. He's also a heavyweight with Salita Promotions. I'd like to see Simmons versus Price Taylor in the near future to see which one has the hunger and desire, because I think that's the thing is with Simmons, I see the hunger and desire and some of the skill set, but he's a little bit older. With Taylor, I think I see maybe a bit more intangibles, but at times maybe it's generationally, it's the social media, it's being funny, being a larger-than-life character, but I do worry that maybe he doesn't have that same desire as other people. I always worry about nice people or people that are kind of ham it up for the camera. Do they have that deep desire? So I'm still watching Taylor because I guess I'm critical of Taylor because I hold him to a higher standard and I believe that he can get there. Those were basically the fights. This is the recap. Thank you for putting up with me.